Here's Ventura, RBI single in the first. Watch out. Look at this. Wow.
Crafting the Call is a YouTube series about baseball play-by-play announcing. But sometimes, whether you like it or not, or whether it was always your dream, you become a boxing play-by-play announcer. I'm Josh Suchon from the Albuquerque Isotopes.
And I'm Jesse Goldberg-Strassler from the Lansing Lugnuts. After the fact, in a base brawl, things are fun to look back on it. But when a fight breaks out, how do you call it?
It's not easy, Jesse. I've called 2 in my career. And when I look back, I think there's a lot of things I could do differently, because even if you start to sense that there's some bad blood brewing, and even if you get the feeling that something might happen, it's really rare when people actually throw punches. And making sure that you accurately describe it can be really challenging.
There's a worry that I have in every base brawl, and that is of serious injury. I've heard of, before I first joined my current team, the year before I joined, the first base coach for West Michigan was blindsided in a brawl and had his jaw broken. I've seen players sent to the injured list. I've seen coaches just like that sent to the injured list. We had a player come off the bench who was on the IL and blindside the opposing manager in a brawl, and that was bad. So we are going to see some brawls where things zoom into the funny, and I wrote down some words that a broadcaster might feel when you watch a brawl breakout. There's thrill to it, right? There's thrill to watching a boxing match. There's excitement. There's also might be a little bit of outrage, depending upon what side you go into it. There's going to be some shock if you didn't see it coming and things take a turn. You might have some fun. So it's, what side is that adrenaline pushing you to? In what we just watched, Robin Ventura made a poor choice. We can laugh about it now. Hawk Harrelson lets the moment breathe.
That was 25-year-old Robin Ventura charging 46-year-old Nolan Ryan in the final year of Nolan Ryan's career. Yeah, but I'm with you, Jesse. Again, I've called 2 brawls with the Albuquerque Isotopes. One, there was serious injury. I think it ultimately led to the premature end of someone's career. There was a second one where it was really, really bad. It fractured the clubhouse. There was players who did not go onto the field because of it, because of what was going on. Other people who were hurt, including a strength and conditioning coach who injured his shoulder and was out for the rest of the season, needed surgery. Yeah, I've seen some really bad things in brawls. I haven't seen one in a while. We'll get to the one that I called in 2013 near the end of the episode. But let's start with maybe the best blow-by-blow description by a baseball play-by-play announcer.
Here it comes. A swing and a smash to first by the diving Vaughn. Down the right field line. Kicks into the corner. Ramirez on his way to second. Head first slide. Safe, and in to score is Jimenez. And another hustle double. Right over the bag at first. Now Hosey and Anderson square off. They're fighting. They're swinging. Down goes Anderson. Down goes Anderson. Ramirez went in with a head-first slide. Hosey never gets upset about anything. They came up chewing. Anderson squared off. Hosey decked him. It's a 5-1 Chicago lead, but everybody from the dugouts and the bullpens congregated around second base. You never see Jose Ramirez get upset like that. And Tim Anderson was on the wrong side of that punch.
Well, and he's snooping around trying to get back at him. It's too late. Ramirez got him too late.
And we'll see how this is all sorted out.
Okay, so that is Tom Hamilton with a call that harkens back to Howard Cosell saying, down goes Liston, down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier. That harkening back to Howard Cosell is what makes the call like famous. But I think the entire description of the double, of the head first slide, that they're squaring off, that he decks him, I think all of that is just outstanding, Jesse.
So many fights erupt out of nowhere. And this one, Hammy's got a moment to see what's happening because the two of them face off with one another and he is in his element throughout. And it helps that Hammy's guy wins and then nothing erupts from it. It's just Jose Ramirez knocks down Tim Anderson and everybody comes out and surrounds them and nothing blows over from there. So yeah, Hammy was made for this moment.
Another detail that immediately adds context is when he keeps saying Jose Ramirez never gets upset. He says that a couple of times. He never gets upset. So there's context to this. And then immediately, even when he says they square off and decks him, I don't know if any call will ever be better than this when it comes to a baseball game turning into a very quick boxing match.
If Hawk's guy was Nolan Ryan in the opening clip, how would that have sounded? If Hammy is calling it and Hammy is calling for Nolan, how would things have gone? But as it was, because Hawk's guy is Robin Ventura, he's just going to let the moment breathe. Yeah, it was the convergence of everything going well. You got the camera shot of the relievers filing out to head out there, which I thought was great and cinematic. And thankfully, it did not lead to anything more happening.
So whenever we do any of these clips on Crafting the Call, I often think about what would I say, and I think about where would my eyes go? And so I'm thinking about, okay, how might I do this? There was a double into the corner. I see a head first slide. Maybe I look down to update my scorebook right away. Maybe I'm watching the action out there. And when it comes to the punch, right, they square off and then there's something and it's like a right kind of hook. It's very easy to miss it. So I'm wondering, did he just keep his eyes on the monitor the entire time in order to see it? Did he immediately grab his binoculars? Or does he just have incredible vision from high up on the press box to look down and see that? Because that is an easy punch to miss in real time before you watch the replay.
Yeah, that was quick. In fact, I miss it. Whenever I see it live, that's a tough one for me to see. And then I see the replay and I go, oh, he caught him. So I agree. And Hammy did not miss it.
I think that even like as I talk through this, one of the lessons that I think about is that sometimes I have the habit, Jesse, where as soon as a play is over, I start to update my scorebook because I want to make sure it gets updated in case the next batter swings to the first pitch so that I don't confuse anything. But also that's my way of letting it breathe, especially when you're working solo. All right, there's a double. It's an RBI. I'm going to quickly update my scorebook. That's the way that the broadcast will breathe. And then I'll get into the summation of whatever happens next. If I would have done that, I would have missed it unless I realized immediately, uh-oh, these two guys are squaring off. These guys are having words. I better pay attention to it.
It goes right back to that idea of eyes on the field. Just keep your eyes on the field. And you've got to look down to write in your scorecard. But eyes on the field and see if anything is happening. And don't miss it. I think in this case, there is that brief little pause where the two guys see each other, right? Anderson is over Ramirez, and now we're going to start to see something happen. So you could be writing something down, and suddenly you go, oh, things are transpiring at second base. But you're right.
Okay, so a lot of these base brawls are pitcher, catcher, batter related. But as we're going to see, more often than not, when things really become a brawl, it's because of middle infielders as we get to our next clip.
Feisty.
Broken bat roller toward shortstop. The shuffle, and Clark taking the runner out. Look out. Here we go. Look out. And here come both dugouts.
Now we're going to have a good one here. And Brenly is going to go after Ozzie. These two do not care for each other anyway. Clark doing his job. Yeah, Kendall doesn't like it. I didn't like it either.
Okay, and
now
look at it right here. And look, see Oquendo hitting Clark in the helmet. And there goes a sucker punch from behind by Ozzie.
And like I said, if you're going to throw him,
Ozzie in there again.
If you're going to throw him, you better expect to get one. And here comes Maldonado.
Good for Candy.
Yep, and Ozzie's getting some.
Yeah, they have to stop it.
He's getting some ice on his lips.
Okay, so the Giants and Cardinals, that's around 87. They met in the playoffs. There was a lot of bad blood between those two teams. And I think this is actually a play that made Will Clark even more of a legend amongst Giants fans. The fact that he took on Jose Oquendo and Ozzie Smith. At one point, it was a 4-on-1, and Will Clark is just putting one guy in a headlock and taking swings at another and trying to fight off four guys before his teammates come to even up the numbers on him. By the way, I'm pretty sure that's Ron Fairley doing the play-by-play. That's Dwayne Kuiper doing the color commentary. Later, Kuiper became play-by-play. So he's the one who says, yeah, I didn't like it. He was a second baseman, but this is what you do in order to break up double plays. And then they're looking at the replay. I think they do a really good job of describing something, certainly from the Giants' point of view. There was a lot of other things that led up to this, Jesse, but in terms of this play, this moment, it's a pretty good job.
Well, the broadcast perspective is you've got to say, here come the dugouts, because we can't see that. So you've got to describe what we can't see right before it happens to let us know everybody is flooding onto the field. And before that, look at this, look at this. I did like Dwayne Kuiper interjecting the personal piece into it. The Candy Maldonado gets applauded for this, but this is where I get worried, and this is stepping away from the broadcaster. That guy wildly swinging, ambushing in that nobody sees coming, that's where the injuries really happen. And Maldonado just rushes in with haymakers. That's where I get concerned. But yeah, this is the full bad blood, and this is the broadcasters cheering on their side up against the other side with the little notes on the instant replay.
I think that when you are calling a brawl, at least for me, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, these are my guys. Right? These are the guys that I travel with. I'm on buses and planes and airports and in the dugouts and things like this. So I think it becomes really tricky if in the back of your mind, you're thinking, my guy's wrong. Right? Like objectively, I'm thinking, we started this, or my guy's in the wrong of doing this. So how do I find the words to describe this situation accurately without saying something that's going to make me persona non grata in the clubhouse the rest of the season? It's really easy when the other team, they're wrong, they're at fault. Then you can kind of like lean in with your hot takes about what's happening, or if it's fairly even. But I think it becomes really challenging when you know that your guy or guys are mostly the instigators in this situation.
I think that depending on the broadcaster, I would think that you would be able to explain why your guys are brawling. I was thinking about it the other way. You took it one side. I'm going to take it the polar opposite side. Do you remember any football broadcasters come to mind where a brawl breaks out and it's like they're in the midst of the fighting? And there have been words that were said. Wasn't it the Miami Hurricanes color commentator who said that he was going to go down to the field too? You've got to be careful in getting too much on the other side of the equation. So yes, as you say, on one side, I think you've got to channel it what it is, and you've got to explain, here's why they're upset. Here's what's happening, and here's what we're seeing. All the while, not necessarily cheering it on.
Yeah. All right, let's get to another clip. And this is one where this is a clip that I didn't see until about 8 or 9 years ago. And now I can't stop watching it because it's something that happened in the 1970s. And tell you what, let's just play it, and then we'll try to explain what the heck is happening. Maybe we'll watch it a second time, because this is one where your eyes are going, wait, what in the world am I experiencing right now?
Now we've got Jose Cardinal into it with Shaq Crawford, and Jim Marshall out to chat with him. Pretty wild chat. Now both managers have gotten into it, and he says pitch the ball, and he calls a strike on him. Wow, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. Now, wait a minute, hold on here. Now Ted Simmons is getting into it, throwing punches at Madlock, and down they go as the bench is clear. Now the ball players who at first were venting their anger at the umpire now are throwing at punches at each other as they pile up just along the third base side. Bill Madlock being forcibly restrained and being tackled by a teammate, Ray Burris, on the left side as they pile up and tangle up.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it here to hopefully explain what was happening. Okay, so this is a brawl. We can see Cubs-Cardinals brawl, September 22nd, 1974. Al Hrabowski was the pitcher for the Cardinals, and he was very famous for going behind the mound before an at-bat, and he was called the Mad Hungarian, and he would kind of psych himself up, and then he would pound the baseball into his glove, and he'd come storming up onto the mound. Bill Madlock was the batter for the Cubs, and Bill thought, all right, you're going to do your thing. I'm going to go back to the on-deck circle because if you're not ready to pitch, then I'm going to make you wait on me since I just had to wait on you. The umpire goes over and says, no, you need to get into the batter's box. And that's where he says, play ball. And Al Hrabowski throws the baseball and we see a strike. And now we see two batters in the right-handed batter's box. One's about to take a swing. We see a manager that's at home plate. And it's sheer chaos that's happening right here, Jesse.
I think that the broadcaster responds well. At the very start, things get a little bit too fast because this is wild and words start to get robbed from him. And then once he catches up, then it becomes, here's what I see. Can you feel that shift from what is going on here to here's what's happening with Bill Madlock? Here's what I see here. It's such a great broadcaster shift of commenting on to describing what.
Let's watch it again now that we understand kind of what we've seen and watch it a second time.
Now we've got Jose Cardinal into it with Shag Crawford and Jim Marshall out to chat with him. Pretty wild chat. Now both managers have gotten into it, and he says pitch the ball, and he calls a strike on him. Wow, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. Now, wait a minute, hold on here. Now Ted Simmons is getting into it, throwing punches at Madlock, and down they go as the bench is clear. Now the ball players who at first were venting their anger at the umpire now are throwing at punches at each other as they pile up just along the third base side. Bill Madlock being forcibly restrained and being tackled by a teammate, Ray Burris, on the left side as they pile up and tangle up.
There's something very 1974 about hearing the announcer say, now, wait a minute, hold on.
I was thinking 1960s style,
yes.
Right? The dad going, oh, fellas. But it's such a great transition. And it's such a great, here's what's happening. And now here's the play-by-play. As we say, this is now the blow-by-blow of everything that's going on. And that idea of saying it turned from the umpires to each other was highly important.
Yeah. So at one point there, the on-deck hitter is in the right-handed batter's box, and then he's waving on Bill Madlock, who's the batter, and then Madlock's the one who then joins the right-handed batter's box and is ready to swing, but the pitch is kind of at his head. Man, baseball in the 70s, Jesse, it was something.
Well, as the broadcaster, we are tempted, right, to simply describe what we see, but there's too much going on, and this is a different kind of base brawl. Jose Ramirez, Tim Anderson, Tom Hamilton can just focus on these two players at second base. Will Clark against the Cardinals infielders, we're going to focus on Clark, and they're antagonizing him, and now here comes everyone running out. This is chaos breaking out all over the field. Where in the world are you looking?
Yeah, and then what do you describe? Like how you're right. There's so many things that are happening. What do you describe, and how fast can you describe it without losing your breath and kind of losing your mind temporarily?
I think that the place to go to is to go right back to the start. And you can say there are brawls happening all over. Here is one thing happening here. And then you say, here's what precipitated this.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So speaking of the 1970s, I want to get into one other play from the 1970s because it was a wild decade. This is a playoff game, and we're about to watch this next clip.
That ball's going to be over the head of Rivers, maybe. No, it's going to be over Rivers' head. McRae is going to score and press going for third. Quite a third base already. But Brett went in hard, and both teams are out on the field. Brett went in hard at Nettles, and Nettles kicked him, and that's when the fight started. Billy Martin right in the middle trying to break it up. But the Royals lead 1-0. A triple into right center field by George Brett. I think Gidry, Scooter got in the middle of that, and he decided he'd better come out of it.
That's for sure. And they got Potzak out of there, too, as you can see.
Okay, so that is game 5 of the playoffs when it was a best of 5. This is the decisive game 5, and there's a fight. By the way, no one gets ejected from this game, Jesse. And this is Yankees broadcast. I don't know who's doing the play-by-play, but Scooter is Phil Rizzuto. And this is the score, and he kicked him, and they got into it, and this is the score. I just get the feeling that this just happened on a regular basis, that there's no, like, I'm blown away that a brawl is happening during the decisive win or go home playoff game.
This is such a professional above the fray call that it reminds me of me. And this is what I worry about as I go, oh, should a broadcaster get more involved? Should a broadcaster get more into it? Because this is what I was talking about. Let's go to the cause and the main idea. So all of this is breaking out. Hey, by the way, it's an RBI triple. It's 1-0. This all happened because he pushed him. Anyway, there's no that jazz from the fight. Do you know what I mean? This is very much the dugouts have emptied. The players are all out on the field. And now everything's happening. And now, look, there's Freddie Potek. They got him out of there. Which, by the way, the great Freddie Potek apocryphal story is, because Freddie was tiny, is that a brawl broke out, and the biggest guy on the other team looked at Freddie and said, I'll take you and a player to be named later. It starts off, right? He's not gonna catch it. Oh, he might. No, he didn't catch it. Yeah. So we're already off balance.
Respectfully, the entire call is terrible. He's going to catch it. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Oh, wait. It's.
But so we're off balance. Now we've got the shoving, and this is wild at third base. It reminds me a little when you say there are no ejections. This comes into, in the NBA, when a brawl breaks out and you look at it afterward, you go, well, that guy's a key player for his team. So should we suspend him and change the series? George Brett is a key player for the Royals. Should we take him out right here? No, you know what? We figured everything out. Let's keep things going.
Yeah. Again, baseball in the 70s was really something. Baseball in the 80s was also really something when it came to brawls. So let's look at
quick timeout.
Yeah.
What I think about is Pete Rose at home plate in the All-Star game and Ray Fosse. Mm-hmm. And that's seen as, I would argue, an outlier of sorts. And I think that you and I can discuss how that's not actually an outlier.
Well, let's do it. Why is that not an outlier?
Well, the more that we watch these videos, the more we understand here's the way that the game is played. And the injury is actually what makes it pop up. And that Ray Fosse getting knocked out and this affecting his career. Oh, things are different, but Pete Rose played hard. And this is the way that All-Star games should be played, is generally the way that moment is seen. And I think that there's a whole school of folks who will look at this play and go, this is the way that baseball should be played. Look, George Brett is giving no ground, and here we go. Do you know what I mean? Like the culture of the thing. And the broadcaster's going, look at this. All right, the benches have emptied. Here's what called it. Let's move on. The umpires are going, all right, let's move on.
I think the other thing for context here is that, remember, in the 1970s, only a handful of games were televised. Once you got to the playoffs, then every game was televised. Even once you got into the 1980s, not every game was televised. It wasn't until the 1990s that, and even the mid to late 90s, where truly every single game was televised. So a lot of times you'd have these brawls and there's no video footage of it, or the game wasn't on television. Maybe we have a radio call that's very staticky that we can splice together based on a local TV camera operator who might have been there. And so the word that comes to mind is repercussions. There wasn't as many repercussions for getting into fights because we just didn't see them, right? Sports Center wasn't a thing in the 1970s when this George Brett, Greg Nettles brawl took place. Of course, we didn't have social media back then either. So maybe there was like these Sunday night highlight shows and different things like that, This Week in Baseball, where we would see fights. But there wasn't the immediate that night, next morning, 24-hour news cycle repercussions. Something would get written about in the newspaper. Maybe you'd have a talk with the commissioner, the president, the National League, American League. Maybe some suspensions would get handed down, but you just kind of moved on immediately. And as time went on and more games were televised and there's more and more angles where we can see these things, where we have the clip that Jesse loved of the relievers going down the steps, then it starts to become more of a theatrical thing. And it also becomes a thing of, all right, if you're going to fight, we're going to have to suspend people. We're going to have to fine people because this is just overall just not good for the sport.
And I think that adjusts how the broadcaster describes it. I think about the image crafting. You put it so well with regard to Will Clark, how this affected how Giants fans viewed him. And I would also argue how Fairley and Kuiper are calling it and describing it. It very much shapes the narrative, right? It shapes, here's Will Clark taking on the infield of the St. Louis Cardinals before all the other guys come in. This is shaping the narrative around George Brett. If there's no video of it, the players afterward can tell the story in their own experience. The fans who are there can tell that story. The broadcasters, the newspaper writers, how they describe it. And now you're suddenly saying, oh, this is who this guy was and here's what he did, because of how it's told of after the fact.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's a good segue into our next clip, because we're going to see something from the 1980s where one of the players who's involved, you ask me, what do you think of this guy? And I immediately think he was a boxer before he was a baseball player.
Had a chance to go out in front in the top of this 10th inning. Couldn't do it. A hit now would win it for the home team. The throw, he's safe. And now look at this. Davis and Ray Knight. I'll tell you one thing, you're barking up the wrong tree when you go after Ray Knight, but look at Eric Davis. He still wants a piece of the Mets third baseman.
And Bruce Kim is right there to try and stop Eric Davis. Boy, they're still going at it.
That's Kevin Mitchell at the bottom of that
John
pile.
Denny's right on top of him.
And there's another guy you don't want to fool around with.
Denny is a karate expert. Boy, he is really. There's Bill Gullickson.
Gary Carter trying to calm Denny down. It all started when there was contact between Ray Knight and Eric Davis. Eric trying to stay on the base.
Look at the area around third base. It looks like a hockey match, like they dropped their gloves. Everybody dropped their hats and their gloves and just went at it. And there you see it. It looks like we're on the ice.
And look, you got a quick shot of Eric Davis and Tommy Helms. And Tommy, a pretty good battler in his day, has Davis completely removed from the scene of the action. Watch Davis. Here's where it started. He breaks for third. He easily beats the throw by Gary Carter. Now watch the contact.
The elbow, the shove from Knight, and here comes the right cross.
Bingo. That was a direct hit.
And Knight's getting rid of the glove, the baseball, and he wants at Eric Davis. Meantime, there comes Eddie Milner. And finally, Gary Carter gives it to Eric Davis for the tumble. And everybody comes piling out of the Reds dugout.
Steve, I believe you're right. Eric Davis has been pitched out, and Ray Knight is slowly going back to the dugout. He has also been thrown out. Well, I'll tell you what, there wasn't any fooling around in this one. Many times you see baseball fights where they're all just standing out there and squaring off with an imaginary line in the middle, but not this time.
The first thing that occurred to me was Eric Gregg holding Eric Davis, allowing Ray Knight a free swing at him. If I was Eric Davis, I'd be a little bit peeved about that. I thought this broadcast was outstanding, Josh. I loved you. We've got the bios. We've got the background of Ray Knight. We've got the background of John Denny. We've got the description of everything going on. We've got all the gloves that are down on the field to make it resemble a hockey fight. I thought this was brilliant.
So this is Marty Brennaman. We did an episode about him where Marty Brennaman's going to tell you what he thinks, and he is not going to be shy or apologize for giving you his opinion. The other announcer that you hear is Steve Physiok, who worked for the Reds before going on to work for the Angels and the Royals. I feel like there's just so much baseball royalty that was down on the field, right? You've got Gary Carter. You've got Eric Davis. I saw Tony Perez. I saw Dave Parker. I see Pete Rose. Just so much baseball royalty that was down on the field. And this is the 10th inning of a game that the Reds are on the verge of trying to win. And Ray Knight, again, I go back to what do I know about Ray Knight? Ray Knight was an amateur boxer before he became a baseball player. And we hear Marty Brennaman say, that's not the guy that you want to go after. Then Kevin Mitchell, that's definitely not the guy that you want to go after. And then Physiok gives us John Denny. He's a karate expert. We've got a bunch of guys down on the field that can do a lot of damage.
I would love to play this for someone who doesn't know the broadcast team and say, this is the broadcast team for one of these two teams involved, the Mets and the Reds. You name which broadcast team they call the games for. And I don't think that they could get it 100 times out of 100.
That's an outstanding point. Yeah, I don't even think that we've said it. People probably know. That's the Reds broadcast. That's a really good point. You would not know.
Yeah, they're describing what's happening. They're letting you know. And then here's the point. They're getting right back to the origin of it all. Now, I was a little bit worried about the instant replays coming here because I still think that there's scraps happening. And I'm going, are the replays cutting into my time seeing what's still transpiring here on the field? But to see the umpires so physically involved, that took me aback. I would think that if there was a fight that took place right now, I would be shocked to see the umpires hauling guys away from the fight.
All right. You ready for one of the brawls that I've described?
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay. Before I set this up, this was 2013. So this is before we had high-def cameras in minor league baseball. This was not my first year broadcasting baseball, but it was my first year with the Isotopes. And it's the first brawl that I've ever called. And definitely would do a lot of things differently. So that's the setup as we watch the Memphis Redbirds and the Albuquerque Isotopes from 2013.
Sellers is 1 for 2. And the 1-0, that one's up and in, and Sellers is pointing at the pitcher. Someone's been ejected. The benches are clearing. The umpires are getting in the middle of it. Cooler heads are going to prevail. At least I think cooler heads are going to prevail. The bullpens have emptied out, and they are now coming into it. And it looks like some people from the bullpen punches are being thrown. It is on. It is on at the lab, and it's ugly. Players are down. And they're still being tangled up. Some are trying to play peacemaker. And there's going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot of consequences for this one. Jeremy Moore is being held back by Franklin Stubbs. The players are now heading back toward their dugouts. Most of them have their hands on their hips. There's still a lot of tension on the field. Gloves are everywhere. The umpire's in the middle of it. We'll see who was all ejected from this one. It started when Jeremy Moore In the second inning, asked for time before a pitch. It was not granted. The pitcher at the time, Michael Clado, did not seem to be happy. The next pitch to Moore was up and in. Moore walked in that at-bat. In his next at-bat, he was hit by a pitch. He pointed the bat at the pitcher, Clado, was not happy at all. Then Moore hits a 3-run home run in his next at-bat against Rondon. And then the 1-0 pitch to Justin Sellers was up and in. Sellers was irate. And it didn't look like anything was going to happen. It looked like that it was going to be calm. And then when the bullpen guys came in, that's when things escalated. That's when punches were thrown. That's when the wrestling matches began. Sellers was hit in the shoulder. He pointed. It looked like the pitcher, Rondon, had his hands up in the air like, hey, I wasn't trying to hit you.
All right, so I'll pause it there. Critique me, Jesse.
Doggone bullpen guys escalating everything. This was fine. We were going to be fine. And don't think I didn't notice that third umpire backing away, right? This is the opposite of Eric Gregg. That guy took a look on everybody shoving, and he's like, why don't I go hang out near the outfield wall right now? So as you start, you call it very big picture. It is on, right? And then you're just watching everything happening. So I'm thinking to myself, boy, I'd like some specific names. I'd like you to take one specific shot here or one specific spot here and describe this guy or this guy. Now, if you were crafty and sly and maybe a little bit underhanded, you would describe the player on the other team who's throwing the punches and the player on your team who's being the peacemaker, or however you wanted to go about it. But when you mentioned that Moore was being held away by Stubbs, I'm like, there we go. Now we're getting the names to this action that we see. And then you go back to the start and you're telling the whole story of what led up to this. And that was exactly what I needed. So we've got the it is on, the big picture brawl. You're saying, like, you're waiting to see if anything's going to happen. Now it's happening. Why it's happening. Here we go. That's my critique. How do you critique yourself?
So that's the main thing, is not saying enough people's names about what's happening. And I think that one of the things that just becomes really challenging about broadcasting minor league baseball is that we don't have years and years of knowledge of who these guys are. Right? Marty Brennaman and Steve Physiok, they know Eric Davis and Ray Knight, Kevin Mitchell, and John Denny. It's mostly a bunch of anonymous guys for us. Even guys on our own team, the rosters churn over so often. The players from the other team, we do our homework, but in terms of being able to identify this player is doing this, we just don't know those things. And so I know that in my mind, I don't want to get names wrong. I don't want to only point out what guys on my team are doing. It's also hard to see exactly what's going on with that. So I think that, my infamous phrase, cooler heads are going to prevail, I think is probably something that I should have waited for that. I should have done more description of both benches are emptying and immediately start to say the names of people who are more heavily involved with this, maybe kind of let it play out and then get into more of it, maybe saying there's a scrum here, there's a big scrum that's over here, kind of get into more details like that.
There is such that worry that there might be that serious injury that is incurs. So you cannot applaud it. You cannot go into it with any kind of thrill that after the fact you go, oh, well, that's bad for us or that's bad for them. And you're seen as egging it on. But as you said, you cannot go into it and sound like you were casting aspersions at your own squad and like they should not be doing this, or here are the guys who are. It's because that'll reflect poorly on you. And there is that relationship and trust that you do need to have within your own clubhouse. So here we come back to that fine line where it all delves back into, we just heard Marty Brennaman and Steve Physiok call a brawl, a whole like full-fledged brawl. And they could have been either team's broadcasters with what they were describing and how they were saying. And here we go. And things got violent there between the Reds and the Mets. So I do think that there's a lot that can be learned from that simply in the specifics of this player and this player. But as you say, because you don't have the background, you have to go with the specifics of what you see in this moment.
So a footnote to this story, one of the players whose name I did describe, Jeremy Moore, his thumb got bent back when he was down on the ground. He had to go on the injured list. He missed a couple of weeks. He ended up coming back sooner than he probably should have because he wanted to be back, went into a terrible slump and got sent to AA because he was struggling so much. And there was other people that were involved in that fight as well in both teams that suffered some type of injury as well. So yeah, there was like real ramifications from an injury standpoint that took place in that brawl. And again, knowing what I know now about, at the bottom of the pile, his thumb got bent back. He went on the injured list. I think about whenever someone is down on the ground now, all these guys are wearing spikes. Is someone going to get spiked accidentally, let alone on purpose, when they're at the bottom of a pile? And it starts to make me quite queasy, in fact, once players start to get down on the ground.
Yeah, you can go full television call, where to prepare for this, I watched a lot of Major League Baseball brawls, and there are announcers who just say, look at this, watch this, how about this? And then they let the picture tell its own story. But if your call is also being simulcast on radio, you cannot just let the video stand for itself.
Yep, and that's another example. Yeah, it's a simulcast. So mostly what the audience is hearing on radio at some point is the organist.
Charge!
All right, so we have saved the ugliest, most infamous brawl for last. Let's go to 1984, the Braves and the Padres. And want me to try to set this up, or do you want to just hear it, Jesse, and then hear how the announcers describe this?
I think you can give a little bit of background, and then we'll go into it because the announcers are terrific.
Okay, so a little bit of background. This is 1984. The Padres are in first place. The Braves are in second place, but the Braves are way back. They're like 10-something games out of first place. And this is a Sunday afternoon, and let's just watch it now. That's enough.
Ozzie Virgil. So now Jack Kroll runs the club, and Lefferts delivers inside, and I think he's going to be gone too. Here come the Braves. They are going after Lefferts. For the fourth straight time, Perez coming to the plate, and we've got one going now. And there are some hot-tempered individuals out there. Pascual Perez not involved there. Well, I tell you what, this is about as good a little battle as you're going to see. We've got about 5 separate fights going on out in the field. Pascual Perez is not out there. He's gone back to the Atlanta dugout. Champ Summers went after Pascual Perez, while all the other players congregated out in the middle of the infield. Summers headed directly for the Braves dugout. He was held back by somebody. Here he goes. Summers charging after Perez. Bob Horner has come out. We've got some fans involved now. Oh my. Oh my. This one is very close to getting totally out of control. A couple of fans have come down onto the field. Other fans were involved throwing things. There's still one fan down there in the middle of all that.
It looks like Rick Camp is trying to protect the Padre down there now. In a way, it's good a fan got involved because that'll turn all the players. It's like a family feud. Turn all the players against the fan.
Okay, we've got one fan that's been grabbed by a couple of security guards. There we go again. Now Gerald Perry and Tim Flannery getting into it. Or is that Bavacqua? Flannery's been pulled out of that, Rhubarb, but we've had about 6 or 7 separate fights break out here. Security guards down in the field have a couple of fans in handcuffs, leading them off the field. Flannery's been pulled back by Joe Pignatano. It's not so funny anymore.
A couple of fans have been handcuffed. They're being let off. I wonder if Horner re-injured his hand. He was trying to prevent it down in front of the Atlanta dugout. John McSherry now right in the middle of it, and he's saying, everybody get back where they belong.
The umpiring crew trying to get tempers cooled down. I am amazed, really, that there isn't a player out there in the field that's hurt. Let's watch what happened again.
Yeah, here we go again. Right at him. Bingo. Well, you know that that's going to start it. Well, the way a Braves bat boy got shaken up in all that altercation. It all started really when Wiggins got hit with the first pitch of the game. Since then, no fewer than 6 pitches have been thrown in the vicinity of Perez.
It's happened every time Perez came to the plate. When he came to the plate in the second inning, Whitson threw the first pitch behind him, was issued a warning. In the 4th inning, Perez came to the plate. Whitson threw 3 straight pitches low and inside to Pasquale. That's when he was ejected, along with Dick Williams, by Steve Ripley. In the 6th inning, when Perez came to the plate, Greg Booker's first pitch came way in on him. Out went Booker and acting manager Ozzie Virgil. And now here in the 8th inning, the first pitch hits Perez. Kroll has been ejected, along with Craig Lefferts.
I was away from the mic for a minute, saw Jack McKeon. I said, well, are we going to have any of these? Well, we're out of pitchers. We can't do this again. And the next thing we know.
Okay, so let's get some immediate thoughts from you, Jesse, at this point.
That line, it's not so funny anymore. This is hilarious. First pitch of the game, Pasquale Perez nails Alan Wiggins. And from that point on, the Padres decide, okay, so we're going to hit him as retribution. And then they missed him in the 2nd inning. And then they missed him in the 4th inning. And their manager and their pitcher were ejected. And then they missed him in the 6th inning. And the acting manager and the pitcher were ejected. And then finally here, Craig Lefferts in the 8th inning hits him. In his 4th at-bat, the starting pitcher is pitched into the 8th. In his 4th at-bat, he gets hit. And the acting manager is ejected. And Craig Lefferts is ejected. And now that Pasquale has finally been hit, it breaks out. Ha, ha, ha. Except not only have things escalated to the point between the two teams, but the fans' blood is boiling. And there's a great side story. Bob Horner is hurt. He's in the press box. He sees how things are building. He runs down to the clubhouse. He gets himself in uniform. And Champ Summers, when he breaks away and runs at the dugout where Pasquale is sitting, while everyone else is brawling on the field, there's the injured Bob Horner to serve as security guard and basically say, you're not getting through me. It's the situation where, as the broadcasters, you're going, this is wild. Look at this. The second the fans get involved, that is the realization that, uh-oh, things have really escalated beyond the point that we've got control over. And I don't think that the players understand. The players are playing in a vacuum. No, they're not in a vacuum. This is at a ballpark where all these fans are seeing and hearing. Now we've got folks on the field, and now we've got handcuffs. This turns from just baseball entertainment into something a lot worse. How about you?
So this is Pete Van Wieren, and this is Skip Carey. And I think they're fantastic. At one point, Pete says there's 5 separate fights. At another point, he says Pasquale Perez is not in there. At one point, he says this is very close to getting very out of control. And I smirked because I think it is out of control. And then when the fans go on the field, we hear Skip Carey say that this might be a good thing because it's a family feud. Now it's the players versus the fan. And I thought that was a really important perspective to hand there. And then again, as you mentioned, the line, it's not so funny anymore, is a fantastic line that says, okay, this needs to stop. I think that as ugly as this brawl was, the descriptions by Pete Van Wieren and Skip Carey were, I think that they're just like top notch. I think this is like an A+ job of describing what's happening.
When we had our Skip Carey show with Chris, one of the big things that came up was how much Skip connected to the fans. And this is just another example of it. This is a broadcaster who's not just broadcasting a game and the proceedings. he very much is talking directly to the fans and connecting with the fans, and then getting affected by how the fans are interacting with all of this.
So here's the thing about this brawl. It wasn't over. Let's go to the next round of this brawl.
He recorded one strikeout, walked one batter, and hit one batter, which led off this game and caused a very interesting afternoon. Nettles has accounted for San Diego's only run.
For San Diego, Bobby Brown and Jim Summers. For Atlanta, Rick Baylor, Steve Petrosian, and Gerald Perry.
Okay, we've got the word now on the players who...
And that pitch hits Greg Nettles, and he's going after Donnie Moore. Here we go again. Nettles in the middle, Moore backing out. The benches are emptying again. My, oh, my, oh, my. The Goose is involved. I have never seen a ball game where so many separate incidents have occurred.
Now here come the guys who were thrown out earlier for the Padres coming back out.
Here's who was thrown out during the last melee, along with pitcher Craig Lefferts and acting manager. Upset, although this many times you have to question it. But why in the world would any fan run down in that field and try to get involved in something like that?
Well, I don't know if this fan wanted to be involved or just wanted a souvenir. Well, he thought everybody else's attention was diverted. He headed for a batting helmet, and that turned out to be a big mistake.
What the Padres want, they want certain fans removed. They're trying to point out who the offenders were. It looked like they were throwing beer or soft drinks down at the Padres. I'll tell you what, regardless of how this one ends, when these two teams get together next in San Diego on September 21st, better be ready for anything.
Okay, I think that might have clipped out on some of the part where we actually saw the fan running out onto the field. But here's round 2 of this, or maybe this is round 3 of this, Jesse. And this is a case where we're starting, you can hear in the background, public relations is announcing these are the players that are ejected. So it's very likely, as you're trying to do play-by-play, maybe you're also trying to take one earphone off, listen to the guys getting ejected, maybe write their names down. All of a sudden, here we go again.
Well, the word came out from the Braves, right? They've hit our guy. Now we are going to get our own measure of revenge. So Donnie Moore hits Greg Nettles. I think once again that there's a tangible broadcast shift. Whereas before, there was such a big moment where it's not so funny anymore. Okay, we have gone from all of these brawls to the fans are involved. And I thought that the description of, we go from my, oh my, look at this, to the Padres are pointing out the fan. And here's what is happening at the dugout. Here are the direct interactions that we're seeing. Where the broadcaster turns reporter is so important because the video, the pictures can only show us so much. So what has actually happened over there and what are the Padres trying to go for? And it does not matter what side you're on. It does not matter that you're the Braves broadcast crew. You are impartially saying exactly what is happening at the Padres dugout and why the Padres are up in arms and why security is over there.
A couple of footnotes from this that don't have anything really to do with the play-by-play, but there were 17 players who were ejected from this game. When the two teams did meet later in the season, the Padres had already clinched, and Pascual Perez actually started the second game of that series. And there was a lot of, I went back on newspapers.com, and there was a lot of people questioning, like, why would you bother having him pitch? Like, what's the point of all this? You've clinched the division. And Joe Torre's thought was, well, he's going to have to face them again at some point. Might as well have him face now. And as it turned out, there was no further repercussions when the teams did meet in San Diego later that season. But even the fact that Pete Van Wieren mentioned these teams are going to play one another again later on in the season was another just like really good nugget that was added in to the middle of all this description.
I love specifics that he specifically said, here is the date, that they looked that up. That's so good by Pete.
Yeah. So another note that I found humorous was, I don't know if it's humorous. Again, when I look back on newspapers.com, there was a quote from Glenn Hubbard who said, "What will I tell my kids?" And it was really blown up, a big headline. And it was really interesting reading the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for all of the details that they had there. That 1984 Padres team was wild. Man, Dick Williams, their manager, Joe Torre said, on the record, he said, Dick Williams is an idiot with a capital I. Like the war of words between the two teams in print over the next few days and into the next few weeks. By the time they did meet in September, they had kind of an understanding that we can't do this anymore. And I remember, I know that I've talked to Joe Torre about this when Joe Torre managed the Dodgers and I was doing the Dodgers pre and post. And anytime there would be any type of brawl, you couldn't help it. You asked Joe Torre about this one. And you could tell from Joe's body language, from his tone, that he was embarrassed to be a part of it, that it was just this awful thing that just kept going and going and going.
Well, there was no bad blood before this game. This was something that all erupted during this game, and it became a 9-inning war between two teams. There was a quote from John McSherry. Did you see this?
Read it again.
The umpire crew chief, he said about this, and you can see McSherry, Big John, in the middle of everything. It took baseball down 50 years. It was the worst thing I have ever seen in my life.
Yeah. So apparently, like, what might have started this was that the day before, Pascual Perez was charting pitches from the Braves dugout. Alan Wiggins tried to bunt to get his way on multiple times, and Pascual started yelling at him like, "Swing the bat," and probably said it in a not so nice way. So perhaps that is what started all of this the day before, because again, this is the first batter of the game. He gets hit. And then from that point on, I mean, at this point, when you keep trying to hit somebody 4 different times, clearly that's the manager who has instructed his pitchers. Somebody must hit him, right?
I mean, Pascual Perez, the man who hit 4 batters with pitches in 215 to third innings in 1983. You can look through his HPP numbers. He didn't hit guys.
Yeah.
That change, and I really like that we've gotten here. Because we've got Tom Hamilton's absolute joy at Jose Ramirez knocking out Tim Anderson. And there is that thrill, the sweet science of boxing. The Down Goes Frazier is delivered with such gusto by Howard Cosell, and how great it is to watch a true boxing match. But there is such an ugly side in baseball where you can have, in the thick of everything going on, in your own experience, you can have the bullpen come in and escalate things to the point where a guy who's chiefly involved has his career abjectly changed for the worse. You've got this where things just continue inning after inning after inning, and you've got fans fighting with players and entering the dugout and arrests being made. There is such that potential ugly side to all of this that you do have to take that step back on as a broadcaster and understand, what is the tone of this brawl? And what is the proper tone for me to strike in describing it?
It's not easy, because it can be fun and you can get a lot of applause when you have a call like Tom Hamilton did. But at the same time, it can be very tricky in these moments as well. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's not something that you could ever prepare for, unless something happens the night before and you just get this queasy feeling that it's not over. It's going to continue the next day. This is actually something, let me go on a little side note. I think there's fewer and fewer fights in Major League Baseball these days because, number one, the suspensions are longer. Number two, there's more ramifications because everything is on video, everything's on social media. And number three, teams just don't play each other very often anymore, right? You play all 29 other teams, at least a 3-game series. Back in 1984, that was the National League. There was no interleague back then. And so you kept playing the same teams over and over again. So there was more opportunity for the bad blood to simmer throughout the course of the season. I always worry, Jesse, in minor league baseball, when we play a 6-game series, what happens in game 1? What happens in game 2? If that escalates, now we've got a full week long of what can happen. All it takes is one guy who's upset, who throws, who charges, and then this thing can keep going on and on throughout the week. And I don't think there's been anything super bad that I can recall from minor league baseball, but I know that that's always been my number one concern about a 6-game series.
Let me add to your different reasons why we're seeing fewer brawls. Collisions at second base and on the bases have been legislated out. You cannot break up a double play by barreling in as hard as you can anymore. Collisions at home plate have been legislated out of the game. So things that would have in the past touched off a huge rhubarb, now that's just not a part of the game.
Even the brawl that I described, Memphis Albuquerque, it started because a batter was calling time as the pitcher was about to deliver home. That's how it all started. And now that just doesn't happen anymore because you only get one timeout. So you better use it quickly, right? It's not going to keep happening. So yeah, there's a lot of rules. That's a good word, legislated. I think brawls have kind of been legislated out because of some of these new rules.
Yeah, I do think with the 6-game series in the minor leagues, blood's going to boil. And there are teams that do face other teams in the minors entirely too much. You get sick of those guys. But because it's the minor leagues, there's so much roster turnover. So you might see a guy in April and he might not be back there in May.
I think about the Northwest League. There's only 6 teams.
Yeah.
You only have 5 opponents for 140-something games.
That's brutal. You get sick of the umpires more than you get sick of the other guys.
Yeah. All right. Final thoughts before we wrap it up.
Brawls are hard, especially because you don't know what injuries might be getting suffered that you're only going to find out about after the fact. So be specific and be observational. Treat yourself like a journalist and say, here's what is happening. Describe it to let everyone know the larger picture is the basic lesson I take away. You?
Yeah, names, big picture. You can give specifics without getting into like details. There's a small fracas here. There's a big one here. You know, they're trying to untangle them there. My other takeaway is grab my binoculars, see what the high home camera is showing, what the director is showing, and basically try to keep my head on a swivel of eyes, monitor, binoculars, and don't say a name if it's wrong, but give some specifics of what's going on here.
Do you have a favorite baseball slang term for a fight?
Rhubarb.
Yeah. I was thinking brouhaha.
All right. For Jesse Goldberg-Strassler of the Lansing Lugnuts, I'm Josh Suchon for the Albuquerque Isotopes. Thank you for watching this week's episode. Please subscribe, comment, and give us a suggestion about a future episode. We'll talk to you again next week on Crafting the Call.